Welcome, everybody, to the show. Joining us is our very special co-host and fellow traveler, Dan the Dan Noodles Man, the Yogi Berra of wargaming. And as our very special guest this evening, we have Mr. Doc Cummins from Decision Games. Doc, thanks for doing this once again.
You bet.
And I know we had some technical issues last time, but this time we're going to dive right in and talk about Decision's production schedule, if you don't mind.
We have overcome the friction.
Excellent. A lot of friction around here. We got Dan on the show after all. So,
sakes, you know what I mean?
Now we talked about some of this, and I kind of rambled my way through it last time. But let's actually go through this stuff because there's actually this feels pretty aggressive, right? Is this kind of like an average production schedule for Decision in terms of like volume of number of games coming out for the rest of the year?
It essentially will be from this point on.
Okay.
Really, eh? Okay.
Yeah, I think everybody remembers that Modern War had its last issue in 2020, and all those resources remained with the company. And as I have been saying for the past couple of years, those resources were going into greater box game production. And as I continue to try and explain, there's a pipeline, and it takes a couple of years for that pipeline to arrive.
That's pretty understandable. After all, nobody's getting really rich off this stuff. So let's talk about the stuff that's listed here as printing in 2024. So that stuff's kind of at the printer or in the printer's pipeline at least already. Is that a correct assessment?
That is correct. Everything that's in that first section is printing now. The latest word I have is that we should be shipping it from our warehouse the second week of December.
Now it's all this stuff?
All of that.
That's a lot of stuff to be shipping at the same time. Holy cow.
Stuff, man.
Yeah, no kidding.
And obviously, Doc, these are not print on demand type things. You're going to have to hoard all of this.
Oh, yeah.
No. We'll talk about print on demand in more detail next week when we have Ryan Howman and Wes Crawford on, who are, I believe, printing through Blue Panther. So I want to actually ask about the Battles in the East series, Tony Burkett's new-ish series. We got a volume 3 coming out and a volume 4 is in preparation. How's that series doing? It seems to be pretty warmly received.
Good enough that there will be a volume 5.
Oh, well, there we go. So I'll have to pester. I will pester Tony about that personally next time I see him, which will be in February. At least that's my expectation. And this, so we got 2 more operational battles in that series. Very tight game series too. The rule book is very, very compact. There's like one side of one page has the game specific rules. So I'm pretty impressed with it, and a number of other people have expressed that they are impressed with it as well. Now, Battles for the Ardennes Deluxe I have a couple questions on this. But I'm going to start with the last version of Battles for the Ardennes that Decision did, right? Because I have not owned it. So to what extent is that just kind of a reprint and update of the SPI Danny Parker Classic?
Right. So the last edition we did was published, I believe, in 1996.
Oh, wow.
And Mike Benninghoff, who you may know from Avalanche Press, was a developer at that time. He was just barely starting his company. And it was his take on Battles for the Ardennes. So there were a lot of combat strength changes and some other minor things done in that edition. This edition is a straight graphic update of the original SPI. So what you're getting is the original, I think it was 1977 edition, with an expansion of the map and counters. So we're getting 5/8 inch counters on a lovely game board.
Always nice.
2 pieces of game board for that. So you can play the eastern half, the St. Vith and Clairvaux campaign by itself without having that second board out. And then we also have the Sedan and the Celis folios on paper maps back printed. So folks who just want to play those by themselves can also. So we tried to take into consideration Dan's hiding there.
Don't think this was an accident, folks.
For a
Thank
minute
you,
there.
StreamYard, for adding this exceptional new feature.
Entrenching Dan. Okay. So it's set up to be played in any one of the combinations that were originally available, plus the extra scenarios that we developed along the way.
Excellent. Did Danny have any involvement? Did you guys have a conversation about it or anything like that?
No, we did not.
Okay. So I know Danny is still active and has just released what he says is going to be his final game on the Bulge through Compass. So let's move on to Red Dragon Green Crescent. Now, this was a Modern War title, was it not?
It actually was an S&T title as Red Dragon, and then it was the premiere issue of Modern War as the Red Dragon Green Crescent. So
this is a combo too, then.
So in a way, it's a combo, but it's the original design. Bruce Costello has passed away since we did the one in 2015. So Joseph Miranda stepped in to update the design largely with the additional weapon systems and operational issues that have transpired between the 2015 scenario that we did and the one that we're doing for this is a 2030 scenario. So there's a lot of wild card stuff that's out there in terms of weapons and possibilities for operations.
Okay. And now when you guys are calling something a deluxe edition, that basically means it's a boxed game with a mounted map and...
Right. So the original purpose of the deluxe editions was to take out of print magazines and deluxify them with the mounted map and an enlarged playing field, large counters, whatever we could do. So that possibility extends to any 1 or 2 map game that we might be able to do. So some of the boxed games that will be coming in down the road, Blue and Gray is a good example that's coming up shortly. We were able to go ahead and do that because we can fit all 8 folios onto back printed game boards.
Excellent.
Doc, I wanted to ask you something. You have a ton of games to pick from.
True.
Who does this? Who does the picking? I mean, who selects the games? Or do you take requests?
Well, what we do is what Strategy and Tactics SPI has always done. We ask the audience. So we do a set of surveys, once a year. We break up our various game lines, so like Deluxe Edition, new games, so forth, and do surveys, and we let our audience pick them out, essentially. And so essentially each year we're picking the top 1 or 2% from the surveys that we have as the subject games for future.
Dan, does this mean you're not answering the surveys?
I have not seen Dan's name in the survey results.
I answer the surveys, at least unless I miss them, which has happened.
And you know what, Doc? I'm looking at your new website. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess let's move on to what struck me as the biggest surprise when we talked at WBC about it, because this hit me completely out of thin air. I had no idea this was in preparation. Operation Typhoon, which is another fancy edition, updated edition of an SPI classic that a lot of people have a really high opinion of to this day.
Right. So what's going on with Operation Typhoon is it too is getting the enlargement, so it will have 5/8" counters. And to answer your question from last time when I was not present, it's 4 full-size maps plus 4 quarter maps. And so that essentially means it's 5 maps total. It means it can't be on a mounted board, but we still got the enlargement taken care of.
Don't worry, we'll find someone to complain that the maps aren't mounted.
Yeah. So it will fit on a 4x8 piece of plywood for folks who have online,
which is great because that's the exact size of my game table.
Exactly.
And this is pretty much a straight update of the SPI Classic as well, right?
Right. Again, we basically took the original, worked in the errata and other things, and have made some of the optional things that were published along the way available. But by and large, this is the game we all loved and played.
That's outstanding. What's the MSRP going to be on this?
The MSRP is $140. In fact, it's $140 for the 2 deluxe editions as well as Typhoon. And there's a special pledge price, October only, $99.
Guess I'm buying it soon then, huh?
Yep.
Anyway, might as well save $50. That's a whole nother game.
Yep.
And then we've got some folios coming. Now, the Iwo Folio, that's the solitary Iwo Jima game, correct?
Right. Yeah, that's the only solo in the entire Folio series. Obviously, it's the first one to get reprinted, so that tells you it was the first one to sell out.
Mm-hmm. How? I guess let me ask the question that I wanted to ask in the sense of how. It doesn't sound like you're working with like a different printing process for the folios and the minis. It's pretty much the same printing, other than the packaging itself. It's pretty much the same printing process, right? So you don't have like some kind of weird magic where you could just continuously keep stuff in print forever, I would assume.
No, we're continuing to use the same printing. That way, all of our customers are getting those lovely extra thick counters that we do now.
Mm-hmm.
And the other half of it is that the mini game line was set up originally to be a set of 36 mini games, and so as those are aging out now, we're deciding whether we're going to reprint them or we're going to replace them with a new mini game.
Mm-hmm. And we've got a couple of new ones in here as well. 3 new ones. Pike and one. Go ahead, Dan.
So, Doc, when you don't reprint something, you and this is a business question. You own the rights to it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you sell this game, the rights to this, if someone is interested, or you just sit on it and reprint it in the future?
No, we have a licensing department. Most of it seems to be going to China and Japan at this point, but we've had other countries and other individuals license games for other purposes.
I see. Okay. And were you saying that your Folio games now are going to be like the thick counters?
They've always been. Well, I'll take that back. The reprints are the original ones that were done about 10 to 12 years ago were on a thinner counter. Okay.
Thanks, man.
Was the sort of general impetus behind the folios and the minis to provide less expensive games or more introductory level games, or both?
Yes.
Okay, fair answer, I think.
And I'm freaking out because I'm looking at the webpage of all the Folio games. You could buy all these games for $25. You can get a serious game for $25.
Yeah, and a lot of them are good games too. So they are 100%. The folios and the minis are worth a look, in my opinion. Also, show up at a convention, you got a whole spinner rack full of them.
Exactly.
So, and then I want to talk moving into 2025. So the stuff listed under final artwork is stuff that you anticipate being able to ship in 2025.
Right. So right now we're finishing up the Campaigns in Europe expansion kit.
Mm-hmm.
That's the last of that group that's finalizing artwork. So it goes out to print probably 1 November.
Okay. And then blue and gray sounds like the old SPI blue and gray quad as well.
Right. So that
you guys did that before already as well. Did you guys ever reprint blue and gray quad 2?
No, in fact, the Blue and Gray Quad 2 has never been reprinted, so that's going to be the big plus, I think, in this particular.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't think TSR did it either when they had them.
No,
they just did the first one. I've got the TSR version of the first Blue and Gray Quad, and again, pretty much same game as the original SPI editions. Right.
So the Blue and Gray is again an enlarged reprint of the original, so we move up to 9/16 inch counters, keeping the same footprint. So each of the mounted boards is a folio board with one map on either side. In the second quad was one scenario that you could combine Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville. Well, it turns into a Grand Chancellorsville scenario with Fredericksburg and Wilderness.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
So you got that, and you can connect those two between two boards. Also included in there is the brigade version of Cemetery Hill, which not everybody seems to have heard of. So that kind of fixes what was one of the two kind of wiki links that were in the original Quad 1. And there's also some other variants that were published in Moves and S&T that are also included. So it really is kind of the entire SPI S&T package without moving on to any of the things that we did later with S&T.
Sweet. And then Carrier Battle Group, was that out of Modern War as well?
Yes, that was, I believe, Modern War number 14.
Okay. Yeah, that's a Joe Miranda design. Very handsome looking map. Did you guys feel like it was, is the map art going to change for that deluxe edition?
No, it's going to be the same North Atlantic 1980s scenario from the original. So it's actually just a graphic update with a little touch up from Miranda on the design work.
Okay.
You know, I just thought about something when you mentioned Joe Miranda. This guy's got to be the most printed designer in history.
Yeah, I was thinking about him recently. I wonder if I needed to go recount and see whether he's top 400 at this point.
I was going to say Joe's got to be up there with the most prolific. I mean, I would imagine he's probably the most prolific wargame designer.
I think
maybe outside of wargames or somebody comparable, but I wouldn't know who that would be.
Reiner Knizia?
Well, he's done 50 billion games, but this is, he's also independently wealthy and can just design games. So good for Rainer Knizia.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then looks like also scheduled in 2025, you've got a volume 4 for Battles in the East.
Right. So where that group is, I just finished the text, and so that has now gone into really the final artwork stage.
Mm-hmm.
Doug is working on wrapping up Over the Rhine by the end of the year, so that's there. And Keith was working the 7 Days to the Rhine update. So the 7 Days to the Rhine will actually be the same size. There's no way to enlarge it like we did with Typhoon. But of course, it'll be geared around the 5-map campaign game, and really kind of the push of the playtesting and the update and design, moving away from the single maps that we published in Modern War and focused on the multi-map campaign, especially the 5-mapper, which if you've been to Consem, you've seen us playing it the last couple of years. So it has been moving forward.
And how big is Over the Rhine going to be?
So it's a 2-map. It's like Hurt Gun. And it has, again, like Atlantic Wall had all those little mini intro scenarios. Over the Rhine also has plenty of smaller scenarios that can easily be played on 1 map or even a half a map.
Great.
To get you started.
Great. I do not know the answer to this question. Is that Vitebsk battle out of Battles in the East number 4, the 41 or 44?
It's 43. It's the November auction.
Okay. And then I got a question from Joe Perez, an SPI veteran in his own right, asking about the brigade combat effectiveness on the backs of the counters, or are the brigade counters just going to be their own counters?
No, the back will have the brigade combat effectiveness rules if you want to play with that option.
That's easy then. Super duper easy. I'm personally pretty excited about Over the Rhine, although our typical window to play that is in February. I'm kind of feeling like this might not make February, but we'll see it at Origins if nothing else.
Yeah, the schedule projects that particular group for 1 June.
Okay, so right on time for Origins then.
Yeah, well, as we already talked about separately, yes.
So awesome. I don't care if you bring 50 copies to sell at Origins, but please bring 1 if at all possible, and I will buy it.
All right.
When you print something and it's on the way back to the States, is there a pirate issue?
This has come up strangely a lot lately.
I know. That's why I ask.
Well, I guess because we don't float past Yemen, so we don't have to worry about that particular option.
Those particular pirates. So, and then of course you've got some deluxe editions in progress farther ahead, including Napoleon at War. Have you guys redone Napoleon at War already?
No, it hasn't been done. In fact, that one is actually in progress right now in development. So I can say that it'll be slightly enlarged, like blue and gray. So it'll have 9/16 inch counters.
Perfect.
It'll be the original, and obviously on mounted maps. I think the discussion is about what's going to go on the back of the counters, because if you'll recall, these are one-sided counters. So we're probably going to end up going with full color icons rather than the silhouettes on the front. And we'll probably go with NATO on the back. I'm not sure how that goes over with folks, and there's still time to say, hey, no, make the back silhouettes. And,
I don't have a strong position for Napoleonics. I like NATO symbols generally, but for Napoleonics, I don't know if I care too much. And of course, I bought SPI's 1812 after searching for it for years. So you're welcome, America. That will be coming back out from Decision as well. But now, is this going to have both versions of the game in it, like the original did as well?
Right. So you'll have both maps and both versions, and it'll be essentially the SPI version with any updates that we find we can incorporate into it.
Absolutely fascinating game. It's I'm not sure I've really ever seen a game quite like that, where it's basically two. I mean, I guess Against the Odds has done something similar to this in a magazine issue where they've done like 4 different mini games on some, like Fall of France or whatever the topic was. But 1812 from SPI, this is a quite early SPI game, like 72, 73, something like that. And it's got basically 2 completely different games in that package, in that flat tray.
Yeah. For folks that might not recall that, there is a hex map version and there's an area movement version.
I've talked to people who say that they like the area movement one better, and I've talked to other people that like the hex one better. I probably would like the hex one better, but we will see when I actually get it onto the table. And then you've got a couple more 3 more magazine titles in development with deluxe editions as well. Sixth Fleet, Fall of Rome, and American Civil War. Now, those are the updated editions of Fall of Rome and American Civil War, I would imagine.
Yeah, actually, all 3 are the versions that Decision Games did.
Okay. Was there a prior edition of Sixth Fleet that I have forgotten about? That's plausible.
That's let's see, S&T 48, I believe.
Okay. That's one that I don't hear a lot of talk about compared to a lot of other SPI games. And then this Last Raiders, tell us about that, because I know nothing about that.
Okay, so Last Raiders is a new design. The game actually appeared, well, I shouldn't say the game. One of the scenarios in the game appeared in Command Japan in the last 2 years. And it was called Emden at that point. So obviously it has the 3 primary Last Raiders for the Germans in World War I, the Emden, the Karlsruhe, and the Königsberg.
Okay.
So each scenario comes with its own map of the region that the Raider was operating in, but it has the same basic game system for all 3 scenarios. So pretty much like some of the other, the Goiben game that we did in the magazine. So it's in that same kind of vein. And like I said, it'll be 3 scenarios within the one box.
And I want to hop backwards here for a second to talk about the Campaigns in Europe expansion kit. Tell us a little more about that. Now, we went over this at WBC, but for the benefit of the folks that weren't there, this is going to add quite a lot of content and replayability to the 4 Campaigns in Europe games.
Yeah, it turns out that this was actually designed to confuse the audience about whether we were doing campaigns in Europe or war in Europe, and it did very well. So just to help clarify what's what here, in Campaigns in Europe, the maps are actually a redone set of the war in Europe, the 4 center maps. So all of the graphics have been updated. The topography was updated. So you can kind of see the old war in Europe in the background here. So this is a recent Joe Youst treatment of that. So it looks a whole lot different. I wish I could put one up to let you
check out the unboxing videos for those 2 magazine games that have come out already, folks. I'm reasonably impressed with what I've seen out of those. I haven't gotten through table yet, of course, but I'm impressed with what I see so far. So, and then Campaigns in Europe is not going to add any maps, but it's going to have like 4 counter sheets and a whole pile of additional scenarios, some of which are multi-map scenarios.
Right. So the big difference here is that campaigns in Europe focuses on the individual campaigns. So all of the counters have their historical IDs, the relative combat strengths if they changed unit IDs or combat strengths, characteristics. Those are all keyed to the particular campaign that the counter is in. So each of the issue games is one map and one counter sheet, as magazine games usually are. And each one has a primary scenario. So Drive on Leningrad, 1941, and Case Blue, 1942 are already published. And there's still to come an Italy, 1943 next month. And then Northwest Europe will be the final one. And then shortly after that's published, the expansion kit will come out. And that will have 4 more counter sheets and 17 more scenarios, including two mappers. So basically a super East Front Barbarossa scenario and a super 44, basically kind of a June 6th to the end of the war scenario that covers both maps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I actually feel like the Napoleon at War is a little bit underrated, to be honest, the SPI version. Was there a fifth wheel game for that? I thought there was.
I'm sorry, again?
Like, remember how a lot of the quads had like a fifth game that would pop up in S&T, right? Like right. Constantinople for Art of Siege, for instance. Was there like an additional game using the Napoleon at War system? I don't remember one.
I'm not recalling one. There was the Napoleon at Waterloo mini game, which is essentially the same system.
Mm-hmm.
Road to Richmond for Blue and Gray 1. Mm-hmm. Constantinople. Actually, the Constantinople is something that's in the pipeline just beyond 2026.
Okay.
So that's something that'll come up as a deluxe version, including the naval variant, and so that one's taking a bit of time to get done.
No, that's okay. But it's not like I lack things to play already, right? So, what if you cannot answer this, or you don't want to answer it? That's fine. Just say it. You don't want to talk about it. Can we get a little bit of insight as to what the next GOSS game after Over the Rhine is going to be? Is it going to be because you got several on the pledge system?
Right. So where GOSS goes after Over the Rhine is to North Africa. And there are 3 games in that series. Tobruk, Battles for Tobruk will probably be the first one, and then Battles for Alamein, and then Battles for Tunisia. So you can detect just by the title that it's going to be a little different than what we have with the European ETO GOSS. There'll be some slight differences in the system. Obviously, the scale is going to probably be different. But essentially what you're going to have in each box is a set of scenarios based around Tobruk, for instance. So you'll get Battle Axe and Crusader and Ghazala. Tunisia. Tunisia is probably the most difficult of the group because to try and do GOSS Tunisia, we're talking, I don't remember how many maps it would take to cover all of the Tunisia area. So rather than try to do that, that was what helped kind of lead us to the idea that each of these should be more of a set of battle games rather than trying to make a campaign of it.
Mm-hmm. And I think Sicily is somewhere in the pipeline as well. Is Joe still working on that?
Right. So Sicily will come after the North Africa group. And then that's kind of where we're leaving off at the moment. We don't know where we're going after that. And quite honestly, 4 more GOSS games is somewhere between 4 and 8 years. So.
Yeah, seriously. So
let's see where we're at.
Who's the creator of that system?
So Joe Yost is the designer as well as the map artist. And Doug Johnson will continue to be the developer for the series.
And Doug has done a fabulous job tightening everything up too. We saw a huge difference because we used all the latest stuff to play Vakdam Rhine last year, and a couple of years prior to that with Atlantic Wall, I think we were still using the older pre Lucky Forward materials, the charts and the rules and all that, and it made a big difference. So yeah. I mean, even Doug's first pass at those rules, it's a difficult system, right? So it's challenging to put a rule book together that people can learn the game from just at all because it's a complex system. But we noticed a significant difference in just usability in that rule book. Just the organization of it is just a lot better. It's cleaner looking. It has a more modern layout, so we really appreciated that. And I don't imagine we're going to get to Over the Rhine in February, but February 2026, that's a distinct possibility because all of our local GOSS folks end up going to that same convention in Ohio.
Yeah.
So, and then I want to ask about long-term plans for War in Europe as well, because I know there's been talk of another new edition of War in Europe, and you guys have done one already, right, which I would say did some tuning up, right, adding production for the Western Allies, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, the one we did in 2000 was essentially based on all of 20 years of my play with various groups and schools I was at the time. So, and largely was borrowing from the Kansas City upgrades of the rules. So that's what that edition was. Where we're at with War in Europe is obviously we want to finish the Campaigns in Europe project to its point, and then we arrive at the fork in the road, and the fork can go a number of ways. It could go all ways. So from Campaigns in Europe, the expansion kit is not the end all. There are more scenarios that could be done. So there could be a second expansion kit that would have all of the East Front campaigns after Kursk. And there's obviously some more things. We've even talked about whether we would go ahead and do another map in order to make Sea Lion a possibility. So that's one direction we've talked about going. Another way that we've talked about was whether we would try to come up with a way to do the North Africa maps and a variation on Campaigns in Europe. As I've had to point out, there's no good way to do North Africa at a division level. So it would require, we're essentially bringing it down to a regiment and brigade level version of that. And then we might be able to go that. So there's two expansion kit possibilities out there. And then obviously there's what do we do in terms of War in Europe? Basically, Campaigns in Europe is the original 16-page operational book for War in Europe. It's that size. So the real question we'll be asking in the spring in our surveys and in person at the various conventions is, what do you guys think? Are you happy with that as the operational basis for a War in Europe? If that's where we're at and folks are ready for that, then we'll go into working on the design of essentially the 48-page strategic book, which you can tell just by the fact I'm laughing because it's 3 times longer. It's going to take a while to work out each of those original systems to something that we're satisfied with, because I think most War in Europe players were not as satisfied with the U-boat war abstracted the way it was, and with the strategic bombing campaign abstracted the way it was. So, obviously we still want to keep the ground war being the primary, but I think we can work it better. Even some of the tactical air stuff that Joseph has introduced into Campaigns in Europe, we are discussing it in detail on how would we actually implement that in a theater-wide war. So, and there'll be some touches of that, even looking ahead to that 2-map East Front. Barbarossa, obviously, everything has to get divided up between the army groups. So even that, is a touch of how would we implement the Air Forces being divided up amongst Army group level formations.
Here's a good question. Although I would imagine that the rights to Panzer Group Guderian reside with the fine folks at Hasbro.
That is true.
Well, I guess we won't be seeing that then, unless, who to reach out to? Renegade Games. They've got a working relationship with Hasbro. Let them do it. So, cool game, though. I finally obtained a copy after it's another one I was searching for years.
Hey, Doc, any interest in you trying to acquire, and I'm sure I've asked this question before.
Yeah, I think Decision Games should definitely think about buying Hasbro.
No, not Hasbro.
You guys would absolutely be an improvement over the current Hasbro leadership, let me tell you.
Is it too much trouble to try to get the Avalon Hill license?
I wouldn't bother, but
For Panzer Group Guderian or for what?
Oh, we're still talking about Panzer Group Guderian.
well, whatever, I guess. But
Oh,
yeah,
no,
I would consider. I talked to somebody who had reached out to Hasbro Legal, inquiring about one of the old
Yeah, but
Avalon
I mean,
Hill
dogs
games.
got more clout. You know what I
Well,
mean?
okay, but hold on. Let me tell the story because clout might not matter. So somebody reached out to me and told me this story, and I said, "Huh, this is interesting." They reached out to Hasbro and managed, after a bunch of attempts to connect with them, to get a hold of somebody in Hasbro's legal department. I forget what game it was. Let's say it was Guns of August. So they inquired about licensing the rights for Guns of August, and Hasbro Legal told them, "We have no idea what the status of that intellectual property is." And I would imagine that that's probably true for the vast majority of the rights that they hold to various things, including the vast majority of the stuff that Avalon Hill did. So somebody wants to deal with that, Godspeed, but I'm glad it ain't me.
So it's not worth it, Doc, to deal with all that crap.
Well, I mean, we're sitting on between 700 and 800 titles at this point, so I think we have plenty to work with.
What's a title that you would like to see like an SPI game, is what I'm thinking of specifically, that you'd like to see redone, that you don't feel that there's a realistic prospect of a new edition coming out from Decision? Is there such a title?
Dawn of the Dead.
Well, Dawn of
that
the
might be with Hasbro too.
Yeah, that was a license deal, so that's really beyond reach, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that was based on a movie or a TV series, or some connection with something like John Carter and all of those.
The Conan game, only one copy of which exists, and it's in Mark Herman's possession. Like, for example.
Yeah.
So be cool to do John Carter, but I mean, no, it's a lot harder to make these kind of licensing deals now than it used to be, right? In the 70s, you could go to, whatever movie studio and make them an offer, and they'd probably say yes, because they don't have any prospect of selling this to somebody else for more, doing a war game on John Carter or Lord of the Rings or whatever. Now those are billion-dollar properties. I don't know about John Carter, but Lord of the Rings is $1 billion+ property. Amazon literally paid like $1 billion or $2 billion for the rights to it.
And they're making a mess of it.
Well, that's a different show, but I'm not going to argue with you either. So, what about, here's actually, Main Joe Green's asking about science fiction games. You guys have not done a lot of science fiction games, but you have done a couple. I and Dan, actually, both of us really like Joe's Struggle for the Galactic Empire, for example. Anything like that on the horizon? Or at least being under consideration, I should ask, because I know it depends on the survey results.
Right. So Star Force is something that Joseph has worked on, as well as Free Mars, which is based on Battlefleet Mars.
Mm-hmm.
So those are kind of sitting in the background, and we're bringing in a developer who was working with Frank Chadwick on Traveler before he went off to other things, and he has returned to the field. So we are bringing him in with the prospect of him doing those. There's a couple of more mini games connected with Star Force in particular to accompany the two that we did that are associated with the Free Mars, Battlefleet Mars. So they're definitely there, and there's certainly some more potential. I know Joseph is interested in doing more kind of the classic space opera kind of sci-fi games. So it's kind of once again, we need the audience and we need the development staff to make that happen. So seems like it's coming together. So I'm anticipating there may be a sci-fi game every year coming up here, 27, 28.
Well, I'm going to continue rooting for Outreach, which is my personal favorite science fiction game that SPI did. I know it's been in the survey, and I get the impression fewer people voted for it than for Star Force.
Yeah, I think the problem with Outreach is it was done in the 70s, and essentially it's a prequel to all of the 4X computer games that came along. And so I don't know, but any recent play I've had of it, it just doesn't stand up to any of the 4X stuff. Now Joseph has kind of incorporated some elements of Outreach into his Star Force update. So, there is kind of an expansion. He is working on making it a 2 to 4 player game without the psi move. So, it's kind of more of a turn-based game, but also kind of more campaign-ish rather than battle-ish.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to get some of your outreach, flavor in the Star Force.
Well, as long as the map is the entire galaxy, like it was in Outreach, then I will be satisfied. 75 mounted maps, folks. It's going to be a large package.
Yeah.
So, Battlefleet Mars is another one. Callendale did some video on that, and it's an interesting looking game, and I picked it up relatively recently. As you can see, I've been adding to the SPI collection rather aggressively and over the last couple of years.
Nice.
But I don't know if we're ready to talk about this. I know a little bit about this possibility. I don't know if it's more than that at this point, but I know Tony was talking about maybe doing some Western Front stuff as well.
Yeah, we've talked about it. The problem is the usual problem between trying to do a system game between the two fronts when the space and the size of the units is greatly different. So Cobra is probably the only thing that we could redo with the battles in the East in any realistic sense. I think to go over and do a battles in the West would require us moving it down to that regimental system. So, is it a possibility? Yes. Is it something we're interested in doing currently? No. We really want to play out the battles in the East series first.
Mm-hmm. Now, does the current edition of Battle for Germany include a 3-player option? I thought that it did, but I might be thinking of something else. So there you go. Just buy the current one, and you're all set. Yeah. That is still available, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, that was the very first SPI reprint that Decision did, was it not? Battle for Germany?
It certainly was early on. It might have been along with Ardennes and across Suez. I mean, quite a few right after the title. So kind of blends together at this point.
Yeah, I understand. We're all not as young as we used to be, except for me, of course. And of course, this is a little piece of wargame and music trivia that all of us and Dan ought to know this one as well. The 80s pop band Human League did get their name from Star Force. The band has talked about it. So there's an incredible tie-in marketing opportunity here, Doc, that I hope you will take advantage of. With the soundtrack by the Human League included right in the box. Those folks aren't doing anything right now, right?
We'll look into that.
I figured. What do you got there, Dan?
I'm just looking at what SPI has, and I'm assuming Doc has SPI. Do you have all the games from SPI licensed?
All is a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. We have about 85% at this point.
Okay, so the amount of science fiction games is insane.
Yeah, they did a fair number, but remember that a number of their science fiction and fantasy games were licensed games, right? They did War of the Ring and the 2 games that added on to that. That's untouchable now. John Carter.
Right.
There's the Dawn of the Dead game. There's at least a couple other ones that I'm not remembering off the top of my head. So,
isn't Romero dead?
Yeah, he just passed away in the last year or two. In fact, this year I thought George Romero passed away. But that doesn't matter. Some estate will have it, or a movie studio will have the rights. Nobody wants to deal with Hollywood, right?
Did he get shafted? Doug Romero, man, on the zombie licensing or whatever there.
Well, maybe. I don't know. He certainly was influential, right? A lot of folks came along afterwards and did zombie-type stuff to this day. So I would imagine that we talked about this. So, Doc, let's just say it again. The SPI rights that Decision has came ultimately to you from TSR. So what exactly did that include versus what that did not include?
So the TSR group was largely everything that was published in a box that was a war game. So all the box games, test series games, any of the magazine games that were published later in a box, reprints. Most of the magazine games went to 3W along with the magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And before we purchased S&T from 3W, Keith had sold the rights, the licensing part of it to Excalibur Games.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was the split at that point. I'm happy to tell you that we purchased the inventory and licensing rights from Excalibur last year. So,
Okay. I didn't know that was a formal arrangement. I just thought you had a pile of their games to sell.
no, I mean, we had worked with Excalibur Games in the past, publishing some of theirs, we had traded some of the titles back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
That's in fact how Battle for Germany was on their list originally. And so that came over to us with things like Wolfpack and some other things. At this point, one of the singular surveys that we did last year, and we'll do it again this year, will be to look at all of the 3W Wargamer and the XCal games separately, because we want to make sure those games have a chance to get republished, updated.
So that deal with Excalibur and 3W included all their stuff, not just the magazine stuff?
So as I explained, it was about 2/3 of the Wargamer games. A lot of those had reverted to their designers.
Some of those are starting to pop back up nowadays.
Right. So you are seeing those popping up in other places. But it is most of the box games that 3W did, again, accepting those that were reverted. There's
some interesting titles in 3W's old catalog, and Excalibur had some. I mean, they had Duel for Kharkov, for example. I'd be very interested to see a new version of that personally. So Achilles is asking about an updated version of SPI's Next War, which of course is right there, but which is an interesting game. Is that something you'd like to do, or have you decided that the Thin Red Line folks have kind of already been there and taken care of it?
Well, in a way, 7 Days to the Rhine was kind of our answer to the Third World War. Can we do Next War? Yeah, I mean, it's on the list in the survey.
Fill out the surveys, folks.
Yeah, I really end up saying it's not that I'm waiting for anything except for, let's see what comes out in the survey. I would be very reticent to have to veto anything that topped out on a survey because of other issues, but that has not happened yet. So whatever comes out in the survey is what we're going to do.
I'm not sure which Stalingrad game Perfidious Albion's asking about here. Drive on Stalingrad or
I'm guessing
another one, right?
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, because that's already back in the revised version.
Eric Burke, I think he's probably asking about Eric Goldberg's
Kursk, I would imagine. Yeah, that's back here too, someplace.
And then John Hill's Stalingrad, we have some remaining copies of that from Excalibur, and once it sells out, it'll be available to vote on.
There you go. And for its age, I've pawed through the Excalibur version of Battle for Stalingrad. I mean, it's not 2024 up to date graphically, but it ain't bad either. I've looked at it.
Yep.
So how you guys do the surveys? What, like you said, like twice a year, something like that?
No, the surveys are annual. I start them pretty much right after Christmas, New Year's, and each round of survey takes 2 weeks, so it takes a couple of months to go through the whole list.
What's involved in your survey is, do you offer choices or is it open-ended?
Right. I literally, for the reprints, it is the title. Because when we're doing the main deluxe one, I believe that's over 200 titles. We do 2 rounds. We basically do a round to get the top 10%, and then we do a second round to get the top 1%. And so that's how that system tends to work. Anytime there's going to be more than 50, 60 titles in a list, that's our general approach to things.
Slightly hard to manage.
Where do the choices come from?
Well, the things that are out of print are just divided into their relative groups. New designs are done exactly like we do for the magazines. The proposals are made. I put a notice out to anybody who's interested when it's time for proposals to come in. I collect them all up, And then you get proposals just like the old SPI, S&T thing that was in the back of the S&Ts, and it still is technically because we do publish it in an issue of S&T. And it's the same thing. Generally get anywhere from 40 to 80 proposals. We do a preliminary round online, and then we do a print usually of the top 5 in each category, which leaves us with about 20 to 30 choices. For the magazines, it's 1 in each category because we're essentially picking the games for the next year group.
Mm-hmm.
On the box game side, it kind of comes into, we'll look at the top 5, and we'll be looking, kind of starting with number 1 and asking, okay, what's it going to take to get this one done? Is it a straight reprint? We're just going through the art department with a little bit of development oversight versus, is this something where we really have to sit down and do some design updates? And so, essentially adds a year to our pipeline schedule. Okay. And, so that's...
There's a lot involved, man. A lot involved.
Yes. It's complicated. That's why an increasing number of publishers are just saying, hey, Blue Panther, Steve, handle this for us.
Yeah.
And we'll just do the development.
And Doc, what the hell was I going to say? It was important. It was important.
Critically important, as you know. I would imagine that you might be thinking, Profiti Salvian might be thinking of Wolfpack, which was originally an S&T game. But GMT's got a game called Wolfpack coming out, so that could potentially get a little hairy.
Mike Bertuccelli.
Yeah.
And Doc, going back a little bit, do you have any personal preferences that you'd like to get printed?
I love most of the games we do, so
okay.
Usually my love is whatever I'm working on currently.
Understood. Plus, we're in Europe, of course. By the way, I think you and are you acquainted with Gregory M. Smith?
Yes.
Solitaire designer extraordinaire. But he was asked at a seminar at a convention one time if he could take any game from the past and redo it. He said War in Europe.
As a solitaire?
And I'm thinking, as War in Europe, right? So I'm thinking you guys maybe should have that conversation. But folks, fill out the surveys.
So, Greg, you're welcome to talk to me about it. Dave Powell, you've also expressed interest. You guys can be involved in a conversation, and we'll take it from there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the game called The Submarine was the Battle Line Avalon Hill game. The game called Wolfpack was an ST game. And I don't recall ever seeing that in a box. But sometimes it's a little difficult to determine that, right? You can't necessarily go by Board Game Geek. You got to go look at SPI.
It was a flat tray.
Yeah. And those count as boxes for rights purposes, right? As far as the deal with TSR?
Yeah.
How difficult was it to deal with TSR?
Not difficult at all.
No. I have the sense that they just kind of... and when was that? 87, 86, something like that?
No, I think the reason that it worked so well is we had already purchased S&T from 3W 1991. TSR approached us in, it was late 93.
Okay.
Because I remember that very cold January in Madison.
In Wisconsin, yeah.
Neva finishing the deal.
I went to Wisconsin last weekend, and I didn't even have any cheese. It was all very disappointing.
Yeah,
the rest of the trip went great, but there was insufficient cheese. I have the sense that is into the time period when TSR was going through their own financial turmoil and probably wanted to get what they could out of properties that they obviously had no interest in doing anything with at that point, right? I mean, they had stopped doing war games in the early 90s, like 92, 93, something like that.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a cash and carry deal.
Yeah, so it's worked out for wargamers as far as I'm concerned, in that those rights have passed to a company that publishes war games and is interested in continuing to publish war games.
Yep.
And of course, Timon 6219 would like to inquire about his S&T lifetime subscription. Sorry, but you got the Bloom brothers holding the bag on that. The Doc's got nothing to do with that arrangement. So you call up Brian and Kevin Bloom. I'm not sure they're still alive, actually. But the Bloom brothers would be the folks to talk to about your S&T lifetime subscription.
Yeah.
Did you get? I mean, you obviously got some of the sci-fi games and stuff. So I always assumed, but you didn't get the RPGs, right? TSR hung on to those.
Oh yeah, yeah. They
Okay,
kept anything that was RPG, or
that's what I figured.
They thought it would.
Yeah, or they thought they could do something with, maybe, I guess. But at that point, TSR's history, there really wasn't that much going on. But Dan, what do you got there? Staring at the website. So you guys are doing? You have revamped the website recently too. I should actually ask this question. Yeah, that was immediately noticeable.
Yeah.
So the website got its update on the DG side. The e-rules and the Vassal modules got put on their own separate servers, so they're much easier to access and work with for customers. Obviously, S&T Press is up next.
Excellent. And the magazines are still doing pretty well. And incidentally, I picked up the latest S&T Quarterly on Grant's Overland campaign, and it looks terrific. Yeah. By the way, I can't wait to dive into that thing in my copious free time, of course.
Yeah, no, it's really amazing. The Quarterly is starting to give S&T bi-monthly a run for its money on the newsstand.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I bought it at Barnes & Noble. I didn't get it through you guys.
Yeah.
I was there, and it was there, and I'm like, I got $20. Why not? So Upscope makes sense. That was an actual thing, right? Yep. What do you got there, Dan? Any other questions?
Well, it's funny. You got a lot of those flat boxes. Don't you want to do a shellacking of all the flat boxes and like, here we go, people. All the flat boxes are available now. What do you mean flat boxes? I'm talking about the SPI.
Oh yeah, you guys should definitely not bring that back. By the way, what a terrible piece. I mean, for when the SPI did it, it was a format that made a lot of sense, right? Yeah. It was really an innovative thing at the time. It's just that they probably didn't consider that any sane person would have 650 war games, 20 of which are SPI flats, which are impossible to store, and are 50 plus years old now and are just disintegrating under my fingers. So yeah, I don't suggest trying that.
Okay, scusi.
So it was a neat idea for 73 or whenever it was that they introduced it, though. It was definitely an improvement over the previous white boxes too, which were even worse, if that is even possible.
The games themselves,
yeah. Well, yeah, but that's everything. I mean, everything that SPI did was available in a flat tray up through about 78, I think.
Yeah, when the embargo really took the wind out of their sails there for flat. And notice Avalon Hill switched to the bookcase boxes too at that point. Mm-hmm. So obviously the printing and the publishing part steered to that. So,
You don't have a secret supply of SPI empty flat trays hidden in the warehouse there that you're selling off, all right? Do you? Because I could use about 3 of them.
No, sorry,
I didn't think so. But the problem with the white box is there's even less protection for the counter storage than there is in the flat black plastic ones. Yeah. So they so frequently had missing pieces because counters would just drift out of the box over the years of.
Yeah, but see, now is the storage. Chance to redesign and do like what's that company there that sells 20 battles that changed the world. What is that company?
Oh, that's Lance Connect. That's LPS, or I forget which wing. It's the Against the Odds organization.
Yeah, Doc, you could do a big.
Those trays are, and I understand that this is hard to believe. Those trays are worse than the SPI flat trays.
They don't have to be in the trays.
Well, that's true. I mean, it is the games ultimately that are more important, right? So. Yep. Doc, you've got, to close us out here, I want to talk about Foxconn, which is happening in Dallas over Veterans Day weekend.
Yes.
And that's kind of the official, is it an official Decision Games event or an unofficial Decision Games event?
Well, it's an official Desert Fox Games event.
Right.
Because it actually is a re-updated that, because Desert Fox ran that convention in Bakersfield for a number of years after we sold off the Strategicon conventions. So that's where it was. So it was kind of like the current company-sponsored weekends. originally.
Mhm.
At this point, it's Desert Fox, wanting to show off all the companies that Desert Fox represents, Legion, Revolution, and VUCA, and GM. And obviously DG's kind of stepping up with staff and then hosting games, and S&T Press is stepping up with a slate of seminars from writers and designers. So my hope is that we'll get a good run on the first one, and we'll continue doing it there in Dallas, or we'll even consider putting it somewhere else as well.
It would be damned convenient to put it in Nevada now, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would, and it would be very easy.
And there's plenty of convention meeting space available, I would imagine, as well.
No, and I was looking at conference space because my feeling is, obviously we ran conventions originally even before we had S&T, because that was kind of my roots in gaming, and I know how difficult it is to get a good deal for a hotel convention. It's gotten obviously much more expensive for everybody, not just gaming conventions.
I would like to recommend the spectacularly inexpensive options available in Akron, Ohio. I'm just saying. I seriously, I'm not sure he took me seriously when I pitched this idea to John Krantz, by the way. He humored me, but I'm not sure he was taking it very seriously. I have thrown a link to the Foxconn website in the chat, so folks can go check that out. And I think there's a cap on attendees, correct?
Yes.
Okay, but there's still a little bit of extra. There's still a little bit of extra space.
Yeah, there's still plenty of room. Definitely want to get in this month if you're going to pre-reg. But yeah, it is limited, and just to continue what I was going to say, there are plenty of conference centers around the country that we have kind of taken a quick look at, so that we know we have plenty of availability of space and locations to get away from a 200 to 300 person show, like we're essentially trying to do currently, to the 1,000 to 3,000 level, and not have the hotel problems.
Right.
So anyway, that's where I'm aimed at in kind of stepping back into doing convention stuff.
And I've actually talked to a couple of people who are planning to go as well, so who have pivoted their plans to Foxconn in Dallas instead of wherever else they were going to do on Veterans Day weekend, which strangely enough, there are at least 3 or 4 wargame focused events that weekend too. So, but what are you going to do? It's the logical weekend to do that, right?
Yeah. So we'll see how it goes, and like I said, we'll be talking about it in our after action and seeing what we do.
All right, awesome. All right, so we are out of time, folks. Doc, I want to say thanks for coming. Stick around for just a minute, Doc, if you don't mind. Folks, I want to say thanks so much for stopping by this evening. We had a great show, and we'll be back next week, hopefully with a couple of extra people that I have yet to actually formally line up. Everybody have a great rest of the week.